Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. When I started this conversation with Semir Alihodzic, I said, I think the story for this one will be Semir versus change. And it's a race. And he kind of laughed. He said, that sounds about right, as you'll soon hear. But right now, he is a data scientist working for Travelers, leading a team that's doing some extraordinary analytical work, along with other aspects of how you manage with data. When he was my student back in the day, I think he was a sophomore at that time, his family had come from Bosnia, and you'll hear about that. And I don't know if he was that certain how he wanted to move ahead, except, as you'll hear, he wanted to be sure that he made progress in his life and honored the efforts that his family made when they migrated here from Bosnia. All the sacrifices and hard work. Well, it's come through, and he's come through, and he has been having that foot race with change, now entering into this extraordinarily fast-changing realm of data, using data in all kinds of company interactions. He's very confident, and I'm very proud to introduce you to Semir. Well, folks, this is my not so guilty pleasure is to reconnect with former students. As long as they remember who I am, I'm in good shape for finding former students who want to talk with me for the podcast. And Semir Alihodzic, close?
Yeah, spot on.
Was a student of mine quite a few years ago, and we'll talk about that. But what I'm excited about in particular is that he's working at one of my favorite companies, Travelers now, and he is a team lead for a group that works on data and analytics for a company that essentially eats data for breakfast. Are you working with Rob Hawkinson?
No, so our org rolls up through Mono, and our value stream lead is Slobo Dushanic. So we it's a newer org. I've only been at Travelers a year and a half. Definitely more data and analytics experience prior to that. But from what I've heard, it's a newer org, about 3-4 years old, and it's a shared service for the enterprise.
I get it. You see, folks, how this is language that data guys speak. And of course, I'm pretending I understand everything he said. It's just that Rob Hawkinson had been a student of mine some years back and has stayed at Travelers, and he's a team lead for, I believe, one of the analytics groups that maybe serves a particular line of business. But I have many reasons to be happy that I spent 30 years at CCSU, and particularly that I formed a relationship with the university, with Travelers, and it created a lot of very good opportunities. But it wasn't just the only reason that people found Travelers from my school. It's just, we have the right school, I think, for a company that is in a state of constant change. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about, Semir. I had a little note that I made to myself. Thought we could tell a story. Change versus Semir.
I like it.
So I want to take you back to when you were in my class and sitting there. I think you used to sit in the back row, and maybe because I put you on a team alphabetically, and you were very engaged. But I think back then I had one big lesson that I taught over and over again, no matter what the course was, and that change is happening and it's going to put you in a race, and you'd never want to lose. Do you remember something like that back then?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think of all the classes I had at CCSU, those first few years before I transferred to UConn, your class was the most easy to relate to real life, which I appreciated. It wasn't this concepts in the perfect world. It was more about applying the knowledge to actual day-to-day and, you know, long-term goals, short-term goals, and how to manage them and how to succeed with them.
Yeah, good. Now I'm going to give you that grade that I held back until this moment. You get an A. Now you came, talk about change in your life. You came to the States from Bosnia, and Bosnia back then was not a very happy place to be. Do you remember, just talk a bit about that life change you went through before you settled into starting your bachelor's degree with us?
Yeah, I mean, those initial, 12, 13 years before I even got to college were unique, to say the least. So my parents and I, we came here in late 1999. Mm-hmm. So the war was finished. We actually applied for U.S. citizenship 4 times, and on the 4th time it got accepted. So
wonderful.
Yeah, my parents and I, we moved here, and it was, I mean, some of my my desire, ambition, and some of that fire, that you need day to day to keep mm-hmm. yourself sharp. It all stems from just watching my parents, try to build a life in America, and some of the struggle we went through with that. You come in grateful for the opportunity to be a U.S. citizen, but you don't come into, a perfect climate. We were put in the north end of Hartford. My parents knew no English. We came here with $500.
Wow.
And so they found jobs in, mostly warehouses, doing a lot of manual labor, 16, 20-hour shifts. I would see my dad come home, sleep, pretty much take a nap, and then go back out and work another 16, 20 hours. And that was for the first maybe 3-4 years. And, the one great thing about being here is if you work hard, at some point, luck meets that hard work, and you'll hit that next milestone. And that's what my parents were able to do. I was young. I was in elementary school, finishing up elementary school, and they slowly progressed. They got their raises. We went from the North End to New Britain to the South End. And that was within the first 7-8 years. And then we moved to Wethersfield, which ended up being, pretty much our primary residence up through the point that I was in college.
Wonderful. What a story. And while you were experiencing your parents working this hard, and you were working hard in school, you had to learn, you came in with no English as well, right? And you had to learn English. What was your favorite way of learning English? Did you remember when you were a kid?
Watching TV, honestly. So cable was something that, I used to love to watch TV as a kid and play video games, and that's how I would pick up on English. Mm-hmm. So don't get me wrong. There were some very good teachers, especially in Hartford. There was one lady who was an ESL teacher, so English mm-hmm. is a second language, and she made sure that she stayed on top of us and that we were, not just meeting expectations for where we should be, that we were exceeding them, and that we were getting through the lessons because she herself was an immigrant that had moved. Uh-huh. And so I think it was a little personal for her that she wanted other people to, be able to get up to par with the language as soon as they could. And so that and TV was a big thing for me. I was watching a lot of shows. Oddly enough, like even Stevens, some of these shows as a kid, SpongeBob.
No, you didn't learn English from SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah. So those were the first, like when I think back, those are some of the memories that come back, is some of those cartoons and some of those shows.
When you were thinking about ending high school, you could have stopped at that point. I'm sure by then you had developed some skills, yet you made a commitment to go on to college. You remember why you did that?
Honestly, goes back to my parents. A lot of my family had stopped after high school and got jobs. And, mm-hmm. the goal was just to earn a living that made life manageable, because we didn't really know too much about college. This is 2011. Mm-hmm. Maybe one of my extended family members had gone to college. The rest just either came here already, had finished high school in Europe, so just started working, or they were younger than me. So wasn't really a precedent for it. And for me, it was about just finding a way to have a better life for myself, for future generations, and for my parents. And, you know, just being able to actually enjoy it versus some of the struggles that they had when we first came to the United States. So a lot of it was the driver was just wanted to continue to seize the opportunity like my parents did. You know, something my father always said to me was, every generation should do a little more than the last, because the goal is to have a little more opportunity than the last. Yeah. So, you know, for me, it was more mental that I've seen them work so hard. How could I just stop at high school? I have to give college a chance.
Why did you pick CCSU?
That's a good question. I mean, it was
down
close
the street.
enough. Yeah, close enough. I was working full time while I was at CCSU. So,
I remember that.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, for those first 2 years, 40-hour work week, full time in school, 5 classes a semester, and was picking up odd jobs, landscaping, construction when I could, just to, you know, had to make money while I was in school, and that was just kind of the work-life balance that I needed to make both manageable.
I don't know where the life part of that is. All I heard is work. And then you come into my class, an introductory course. You probably thought you could sail right through it. What do I do? But I say, all right, you're going to be using the internet constantly. You're going to be reading constantly. You're going to be writing constantly. And, you know, you still had to write in the best English you could put together. And as many of my students who came with other languages, they were stunned how much, not only the writing, but it was going to be read by everyone else. Do you remember that? We had it.
The forums
where everyone had it in the forum. And, but I knew that I was preparing you guys for the life you're living right now, which we'll get to, where you do so much of your work through, very fast, quick thinking, writing, and addressing questions quickly as they arise. All of that was in my mind. But you came, sometimes I could remember it was an early class. You'd come in and you had been working so much. And I would keep an eye on all my students, because a lot of you guys worked, and you sit there, and as exciting as that class was, you know, none better. I could see those eyes starting to go down, you know, and the chin's on the chest.
Oh yeah, some long days.
But you stuck with it. Now I know now that as I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and there's certainly we're in the race with change, and you picked probably the arena and the practice domain that is most likely to be changing as we speak. That is that whole data world, that whole flow of information data, which is coming through the fire hose, and it needs to be understood. So not only did you pick something where the technology is constantly changing, not in how it brings it to you and how you can parse it and what software does, but you also have the human aspect, which is the so what, and the people who need to have communications from your team and you about what's going on for the company today over the last 5 minutes. So talk a bit about how you put yourself into that role of studying for becoming a data analyst. I think you were only with us a couple of years, then you went on to UConn. Is that when you finally decided the major you wanted?
Not exactly. Definitely in some ways. I think for me, so, you know, I mentioned the precedent piece, and I had 1 or 2 cousins who by the time I was in college had finished college, and they both had finished with computer science degrees. And, you know, they went on to, and they still are in the work world. One of them is at Aetna. The other one's at I think it's like an engineering company now. And so they were kind of who I looked up to and who I thought about, like, hey, they're doing well. I enjoy technology. And then I went on BLS.gov. So that's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I actually still remember that day like it was yesterday. a small kind of, just a 10-minute exercise that pretty much set my course. So I went on there and I looked up kind of like job categories that will increase the most over the next 10 years.
I like it.
And information systems was, like 200% boom will happen over the next 10 years. So I'm like, well, that's it. Like, that's what I'm going into. I like technology. I like business. I found this major, which at that point was still relatively new, MIS.
Oh, yeah. Very new.
And, it was a mix of information systems, finance, marketing, and general business knowledge and owning a business and driving a business along with accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, well, this looks like a good blend. And I had like one foot in there of like MIS is where I'm going, but this will give me a flavor of everything else in case I want to change to marketing or finance or accounting.
That's smart.
Yeah. So I went forward with it. The transfer to UConn was just so after working full time for 2 years and going to school, I went to my parents and I was like, look, I'm exhausted. I'm maintaining a 3.2 GPA, 3.3, but I know I can do better. So I'm going to take a loan out for the next 2 years each year. I'm going to go to UConn and I'm just going to study full time. So I took that chance.
No, I got to tell you that I remember you talking about that with me. And I thought that is one hell of a change that you brought onto yourself in a very good way. But that certainly wasn't what a lot of our students even contemplated. Both not working so you could really study and going to a very demanding school, UConn, School of Business, very, it's hard to get into and hard to stay into. Not that we were that easy, but UConn, is a research one school and the faculty there have high expectations.
Yeah, and I didn't get in. So I applied and they put me on the wait list, but they granted me the transfer. So the main reason I went was, and my parents ended up saying, we'll take out of our 401k. We don't want you to take loans and you pay us back. So they were very supportive. I just had to get them over that hurdle of like, what, you're going to be moving, you'll be living there, no work. It's a new concept to them just as much as it was to me. So I had to, the advisors were like, you have to take these 6 classes, then you may get in, you may not.
That's right.
So it was a shot. No guarantee,
No. I knew that very well about that school. That's the school I earned my PhD in. So I kind of kept in touch with that school. And when we had the EDGE program, as you might have heard of, we had a UConn version of it. And a lot of those kids in UConn wanted to get in that business school. They had to. And even with the Traveler's Edge support, some of them didn't get in right away,
Yeah, I mean, the advisors were like, you're taking these 3 classes of the 6, and they're some of the harder classes. We advise you to not do it, break it up into a year. But I couldn't waste a year's worth of money. So it was either 6 months, make it happen, or, come back and work 40 hours and go to school full time.
Yeah.
And that was all I needed, was that alternative to keep me driven. And I think I was able to get like a 3.8, 3.9 GPA, got in. And then I was like, so now kind of warm up the seat and get ready for the next 2 years. So it worked out in my favor, but there was definitely some question marks going into it.
Yeah. So at the end of that, as we're going to move you into your career, during that last phase of your time at UConn, were you doing the job searching at that point?
Yeah. So I bring this up to my brother who's at UConn now. And, I had 2 internships, luckily, before my choice to go in. I was at the Harvard's leadership development program for a few years. So, I probably, for those 2 internships and then the full-time role I probably got rejected 42 times. But, just applying, I was applying left and right, throwing my resume everywhere and anywhere, from manufacturing to engineering to insurance. I mean, I think I got to like 10 different final round interviews, and it all worked out because at the end I had a choice between 2 leadership development programs. I went with the one that offered more rotations. The pay was a little less, but it wasn't anything substantial enough. Like it's like, do I want to rotate 3 times and be a project manager each time? Or do I want to rotate 6 times and be able to apply so many different disciplines and then pick one?
Now,
And to me, that was
I have to jump in. You're racing with change, but change is losing. When you make those decisions to widen the scope so you can practice in various elements of a very complex business versus sticking with one, and particularly project management, which back then was the thing to do, as you remember. But it's quite it's temporary in some ways, and you have to one after another. Whereas you have filled yourself out for a wider opportunity in the business world. So now back to your story. Rejected 40 some times, yet there you are. How did that turn out? Your 6 rotations.
It went really well. So I worked at the Hartford and had an opportunity to be in their leadership development program. Anybody who's 21, 22 years old, leaving college, I always tell them a rotational program is the way to go, because you don't know. You understand the industry maybe you want to be in and the type of work. But the role itself, there's so many to choose from. If you have the opportunity to rotate, just, take advantage of it. You meet some great people. It's a leadership program, so they invest time and opportunities in you that I think, a normal just base hire would not potentially get. And that was
Correct.
Some of the other ROI there. It's like, they give you a little more. They put a little more emphasis on you. So it went really well. I met so initially I thought I was going to be like a hardcore coding IT guy. And I had some sessions along the way, and I met some mentors. One mentor definitely sticks out, and he kind of challenged that. He's like, you're really good, you're analytical, and you can code. But the good thing about what you can do is you can talk to very business savvy people who don't understand coding at all. We have this new thing out there. It's called data. There's an enterprise data office. They need people. They need people who can talk both to, what is the value the data is adding back to the business, and then what kind of a SQL or Python process needs to be run to extract the data. So play that middle. You're really good at playing that middle. And I kind of took that. I'm looking at all these IT jobs being outsourced or automated by different tools. And I'm like, let me go into data. It's new, and the ocean's blue.
That's quotable. And it's really cool to hear in your story. Oh, there's this new thing called data. And this is a big company, the Hartford. So they were on it. They're on top of the trends, I'm sure. And I think they're also in the process, like our insurance company, of converting a lot of their business, changing manpower configurations and doing a lot of things to try to be sure that they could be in their race for change, which is, the first to come up with the best proposals for the agents and the first to be superior on claims. There's a lot of competition in the property and casualty part of insurance. And there you were being put up into what seemed to me, at least the early start for where you are right now in the data world. Speed me through this next part. You're in it. You're doing it. You're speaking the languages between the two cultures. Highs and lows over the next couple of years. So some great highs were had the opportunity to really own my work. I had my direct boss. My first role after the rotational program, I went by the old quote of, pick your boss, not the job. I knew this boss was going to really just, whatever you need to do, as long as it's part of our scope, you go and do it. So that was a big high. He was very supportive, and he allowed me to just expand my knowledge and expand the role that I had. Data doesn't come with challenges. So you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks, and then you need to cut that data another 50 ways to figure out why doesn't it make sense. Or there's a data quality issue. Now you have to start from the get-go. Let's say you had a data set, you do an inner join to another data set, and you lose 90% of that population. You started with 100,000 rows, you're down to 10,000. You need to start over again. There's, it's either you need to clean that data up,
or there's a completely different way you need to go about it because you're not representing the right sample size.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some daily challenges. And then the fire drills, we managed a lot of the websites. And so that's digital tracking, all JavaScript based. And digital analytics is an animal in itself. So,
oh yeah,
a lot of questions: how many people are seeing quotes? How many people are getting to that page? Why did our quote rate go down 10% this last week? And then you find out that there's a technical error that, wasn't known about, or
didn't
something.
really go down, it went up. Yeah.
And so it was, but that's when I learned I enjoy challenges. I don't like the same routine. So every day was a different task. It was either getting reporting ready for leadership, or it was diving in deep into an ad hoc investigation about, a certain question my boss or one of his peers had. So the lows were just running into those data issues, data gaps. Sometimes you need other teams' data, and it'd be difficult to get it. So you have to kind of use the power of persuasion.
Yeah, that's people to people. There you go.
Yeah. And so that, it's just kind of, it's a tough world. I mean, but it's challenging in the right way. It keeps you interested, and it was so fairly new that there was no standard around it. So you're creating the standard.
I love that. Yeah.
And so that was, the first few years, had some great opportunities, was able to go up to the senior role. Our org had gone through a change, and we were now data scientists because of some of what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went from data analytics to data science, opened up the floodgates for new tools. Mm-hmm. So, when we talk about data, you have the data ingestion, data wrangling, and then the data visualization. Those are kind of the three high-level pieces that feed each other. So we were doing a lot with data ingestion, automating that, data transformation. How do we refine the data? How do we derive value out of it, put it into new dimensionality? And then data visualization using tools like Tableau. We were trying to get away from the old Excel graph.
Oh my God. Excel was king when you guys were in school.
Yeah. And I still use it. It's funny.
Yeah,
sometimes old reliable,
Old reliable. Yeah. I never learned how to use it, but I admire that you did. But I love the fact that this is where they were writing checks for tools. I can remember that and talking with a couple of other folks, and Rupesh Paruli and a couple of others of our central students who went over to Travelers, and they're in the data part. Rupesh, by the way, is doing cybersecurity.
Okay.
It's a pretty important thing to be doing at this point in time.
That's a hot button item. Right.
Very much so. You stayed at the Hartford, but you're not at the Hart. What was the moment of change for you when you were?
So I think this really was, kind of what started in your class was a thirst for knowledge. So I would go online and just read articles. And some of the reason I worked so hard these first few years at Travelers was to get to that 10,000 hours mark. They say you really don't understand something until you've done it for 10,000 hours. Then you can call yourself. Yeah. So, that was something that stuck out to me. So, I worked incredibly hard those first 4 years, but it was easier than going to school full time and going to work full time. I only had one job I had to do full time. So I was putting in more than 40 hours, to say the least. And then around year 4, reading articles talking about, shifting companies, how that can propel a career. And I was getting to the point that I've been doing this for 4 years. Do I want to challenge myself in a new environment? Can I be as successful in a new environment? Mm-hmm. Is that something I'm willing to risk? I have a great job with a great company. Do I really want to risk it? But I've never been afraid of risk, as long as it's measurable and it's not too substantial. So had the opportunity to connect with some people at Travelers. They mentioned, they're looking to get their digital analytics maturity up. They do a lot of data analytics aside from just digital. And when the opportunity presented itself, actually COVID had just started. So we were in a remote world, and I was thinking, this will be a remote job for a month. and then I'll be in the office at Travelers. So I jumped on it.
I want to put in something here for the listeners. Some of you, all of you who are listening, went through the last 2.5 years with COVID. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, except that I do know from having followed Brittany Ernst, one of my former students, who finished her doctorate at University of North Carolina and came into the Travelers Leadership Development Program the same time you started there, that March or earlier, or maybe in January. Never got to see a human being face to face in over a year. And she was in the human resources side of things. So there you were, at least you had rubbed elbows with people at the Hartford. Now you're talking to people through through a screen. How did that feel after? And I'm sure you adapted. And there was another big change. Change was racing ahead of you, saying, "Come on, Semir."
It was odd. I can't put it any other way than it was. So when I first joined, I think about a month or two ago was the first time I met majority of my team in person.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I've been at Travelers for a year and a half now, a little over a year and a half. And 2 months ago was the first time I met everyone. So
someone says, "Oh, you're taller than I thought you were," or you have something below your neck.
Yeah, definitely a few times. It's like, oh, now I can put the face to the name.
Yeah.
And it was odd. At the Hartford, I worked from home maybe once in a while. So I was used to in office. I love the idea of getting coffee. You're stuck on something. Hey, let's go get a coffee. Let's go do a quick walk around the building. Just casually running into people, something I enjoy. And then, so year and a half, a little bit of screen sharing, but it was very isolated, definitely. I mean, I loved my team. I loved the opportunities that I was getting even virtually. Again, it was more picking my boss than the role, because I could tell that they're more ocean blue, and I enjoy that ocean blue kind of, you pave your way and you tell us if you need help along the way. And that I love that, because creating a standard for me is more fun than just trying to follow standards that have already been set. So it was challenging at times, but it worked out really well. I think enough to the point that now, I have the team lead role. So I'm managing a few different avenues of work. One of them still being digital analytics, but there's some other, more operations and more market insight work involved there now. So I'm glad to be back in person. We're actually doing like a hybrid model now. And so, I'll go in a few times a week. I'll see, it's great catching up with people. We go grab lunch together. I'm definitely a great team. So was it a risk at one point? Yes. Has the risk realized some reward? 100%. So
that's wonderful to hear. You have coffee on the link?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's I love just walking by there.
Isn't that fun with all those umbrellas over your head? Yeah, Travelers is pretty big on that red umbrella. That it means a lot to them. But the times that I go down to visit our interns through the Edge program, I would love, the guests would come off that mezzanine elevator. So we invariably, in order to get to the offices or the conference rooms, we'd walk the link. And what I loved it. And I was so glad that you're able to do it now. As I said this to Brittany too, you're missing the link. The link is, you really feel the company's alive when you walk through it. You see people having coffee, people, some of my former students who worked there, I'd be walking along, "Doc, how are you? How you doing?" It was lively. And, I used to work with 8th graders for the EDGE program to help promising 8th graders from the Britain schools. And they'd come every Saturday for about 6 Saturdays. And I say, "Look, how about thinking about insurance as your future?" And can you imagine a 13 or 14-year-old going, "Oh yeah, insurance." So we get them a little bit of taste of what it was. We took them down to Travelers. They had a chance to go up in the tower, and stand up there.
So I still haven't done that. That's something I gotta.
No, yeah, you gotta be a VIP to do that, or in the 8th grade in an EDGE program. But the gist of it is, what I'm telling you is that the life of the company is very important, and you're going to be. I can predict now. you're going to be part of the next life of the Travelers Company. Next week, by the way, because that's how fast things change. Summarize for me what you're seeing in the way of change there. So that was the subject of our course when we first met. Things are going to change constantly. You've got to manage to capture what's going on and put it in a position where it will do more good than harm. What's your sense of the dynamics of the job you're in right now for the company?
It's like you mentioned, it's ever changing. So I think a big thing has become centralized data sources. Mm-hmm. One thing in these large companies that I think startups have an advantage on us on is there's not disparate data sources. Because of the way things were created, decades ago, you have data silos. Mm-hmm. And now all these big insurance companies are all facing the same problem. How do we break down all these different silos, consolidate our data into one master copy, and then act on it? Whereas the startups, they don't have that tech debt, that legacy tech. They can just come in and start with that approach. Hey, we're going to create a schema that has one master copy, and we grow on that. So I think that's where everyone is going, is creating a data product, something that's consumable by all, and you don't have to reach out 50 different groups for 50 different flavors of a data set.
That's amazing.
And I think another big thing is third-party data. So using consultants and other companies to understand trends in the industry and how, whether it be the industry itself, competition, other industries within, the same state, whatever it is, whatever kind of cuts you're doing, using that to complement your internal data. So it seems like that's where everything is going. We're getting away from the siloed data. We're consolidating everything. And then something that I've seen become a trend is more proactive analytics. So, the concept I've read about, and I'm blanking on the author's name, is perishable insight. We're at the point now where data is so real time that if you can act on it in a real time way, then you get more value than if you look at it in 2 days.
2 days?
Yeah. So if you're, I'm on your website this is one example. I'm on your website and I'm getting a quote. I get to like the second step. You send me a chat. I chat a little bit and then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call the call center. A lot of the time you call and you start from point blank again. You're hey, my name is Semir.
Yeah, you got to go through the whole story again. Yeah.
What we're trying to, and one example of perishable insight is from the time that person hung up to the time that we recognize they're the same person on the phone, sending that entire load of data to the representative so they know, hey, Semir, we know you called. You got to the second step a few minutes ago. And looks like you got stuck on this page. How can we help you get past this page? You don't have to repeat those steps. We're going to streamline you to getting your quote.
Oh, man, I'm a Travelers customer, by the way, and for home auto and liability. And I tell you, if that were, I don't want to have to experience it, but if I had to, that would be bliss compared to some of my other experiences. I'm almost 80, and you know how we get. We get very impatient and a little bit confused, and to have to go back through and retell the story, and particularly you're talking about a claim, you're talking about someone who had an accident or their house roof fell in or whatever it is. And you don't want to go over that again and again. But that is a great example, Semir, of how your company is competitive.
Yeah, it's an industry issue. I know other folks in other areas who are trying to tap into the same kind of insight. But it's perishable. If you called, if you look at someone's record in 2 days that did that, you can't do anything about it. They've already hung up. The data's lost its value. Now it's just another count of how many people called. There's no value in some of the detail. And this is something that's felt across the industry. I know people who are at Accenture. I know people in other industries that they're dealing with the same kind of thing. And we're not competing anymore with just insurance companies. You have Amazon creating 3-click shopping.
That's right.
Check out, boom, and I bought the item. So now people remember that from like a digital perspective. People remember that. So when they go to your site, they've created this expectation that 3-click shopping is the standard and that's the way they want to do business. So now you have to compete with that. You have to find a way to take your, 45 steps and consolidate them down to as few steps, but still getting accurate information so that you can, process it against your underwriting and risk engineering rules. It's a tough dynamic. I
man, I wish I could run this clock for a lot longer, Semir. I'm learning so much, and I'm sure our listeners are. And I guess I'm going to have to chase you down another time to learn more. But I would say, in summary, that you never quite fell asleep in my classes. I won't hang that on you. And I don't think you've ever fallen asleep since. And in this sense, you are acutely aware of so much that's going on within you, near you, and then up through this huge, vast ocean, blue ocean of change. Man, you're still with it. I'm going to promote you right now to an EVP. How's that?
I love it. I'm gonna record this myself and send it to my class.
It's going to happen one day, if you wish. And so I will ring off this part. We'll talk a minute afterwards. But if you have any final question or thought for me before I turn off the recording.
Yeah, I think one final thought, and this is something that I've shared with other people, and I think it's really important, especially for younger people. When I think about what is the key, and I think I learned that your class was a big influencer in this, was ambition and discipline. Those are two factors that mean more to me personally, in my opinion, than anything else. I've met people who are a little or a lot smarter in terms of the concepts they know or some of the books they've read. But it's hard for me to meet someone with more ambition. And I mean that in a very humble way in terms of, some of my upbringing, and just there's a fire to continue getting better. Someone who's smart, if you're sitting on that knowledge, you're not getting better. It's more of you're not acting on it. You got to act, you got to move, you got to work. You just have to always stay on top of yourself and not let yourself get too complacent. And that's where discipline and ambition meet. Continue to discipline yourself to learn, especially as you get more in the leadership level. Allow yourself to be challenged by people, because you won't always have the best idea. And that's why a team is there, is to help you figure out the best idea, and then you guys grow on it. So ambition, discipline, put those together. I think, if someone asks me what are the two things you do every day, I always have ambition, and I'm always try to keep myself disciplined so that I don't get too. Studying is one thing, get the good grades, but that's more of a internal. Those are two big factors, that I think resonate entirely.
That's fantastic. Great advice. And I'm going to take it seriously too. I maintain my ambition to keep the world thinking by my little efforts of how important practice is, how important that action you talked about is for growth and learning, taking those actions. So, but the discipline side, I can't wait to return to golf next week when my course opens up, because this year I'm going to finally get that swing under control.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm fighting a battle myself, still in the upper 90s.
Well, thanks so much, Semir. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, great to see you, Doc.
If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.